The envelope was thick, too thick for anything casual. Cream stock with embossed silver ink, sealed like it came from a palace. It sat on our granite countertop beside an opened Amazon package and a cup of cold coffee my wife left unfinished. Her name was Julia, and the invitation was from her younger brother, Brandon. I recognized the surname on the return address before I even opened it. Firth, as in the Firth family. Old Westchester money. His fiancé's people. Land developers, art board donors, country club lifers. The kind who sponsor museum wings and get their names printed on velvet ropes. I opened it slowly, already guessing what it was, a wedding invitation with all the pomp they thought necessary. Script so elaborate it was barely legible. Inside was the usual, ceremony details, dress code, list of events. But what caught my eye was the phrase, by invitation only, formal placement required. Please check with designated concierge upon arrival. Julia walked in just as I finished reading. She held up 2 fabric swatches like I was supposed to weigh in on blush versus sand. Don't wear one of your startup suits, okay? This is Brandon's wedding. It's a big deal. That was it. No discussion of whether I wanted to go. Just a command. Clean up, show up, and try not to embarrass her. I nodded once, folded the invitation, and slid it back into the envelope. Did you hear me? She asked, not looking up. It's black tie. No sneakers. Please don't make this about you. 10 years married. I didn't answer. Just walked past her into my office. That night, I overheard her on the phone with her sister. He'll be fine, she said with a sigh. I picked out his tie. Nothing flashy. Don't want him standing out too much. Not that he would. Laughter followed. He still does that tech thing. You know, whatever that is. Tech thing. That tech thing was Large Systems. A quietly profitable enterprise software firm with clients in 11 states. I built it from scratch in the upstairs bedroom of a rented duplex while they were hosting garden parties and swapping fundraisers. But that didn't matter to Julia anymore. If it didn't show up on page 6 or in a gala photo, it didn't count. She liked saying she married an entrepreneur until her family gave her that look, that polite, concerned smile people give when someone marries outside the expected tax bracket. So I became just a tech guy. Not CEO, not founder, not the man whose work paid for the kitchen marble she posed on for Instagram. Just a placeholder. Still, I said nothing. Instead, I confirmed the final paperwork that night, a deal I'd been shaping for the better part of a year. A slow, deliberate acquisition of a logistics firm that quietly managed regional distribution for Firth Properties' construction supply network. A company they didn't even know they relied on. Yet, timing mattered. And Brandon's wedding, the one they were parading like a coronation, would be the perfect moment. 2 weeks later, we arrived at the venue, a colonial estate outside of Stamford, Connecticut, all white columns and hedged arrogance. Julia stepped out of the black town car like she'd rehearsed it. Her dress shimmered. Her heels clicked with practiced confidence. She didn't wait for me. Inside, she vanished into a sea of relatives, greeting hugs, champagne toasts, double-cheek kisses. I checked for my name at the welcome table. No envelope. Just a clipboard. A young woman in a headset asked, "Name?" "Michael Caine," I replied. She scanned the list. Her brow furrowed. Then she smiled with the kind of sympathy you give to someone who's clearly in the wrong place. "You're on the auxiliary list. Lower East Terrace. Table 17. I didn't flinch. "What's table 17? "It's outdoor overflow," she said. "Just past the staff tents, near catering." I nodded, thanked her, and walked out slowly. Past the stone staircase. Past the manicured hedge wall. Past the real guests. Table 17 was a round, plastic-covered thing wedged between a generator and the back exit of the service corridor. The folding chairs didn't match. A fan buzzed nearby. I sat down quietly. I wasn't angry. I expected it. What surprised me was how perfectly they had confirmed everything I already knew. Brandon passed by 15 minutes later. He didn't stop. Just glanced toward my direction and smirked, a smirk I hadn't seen since the first year of my marriage, when he asked Julia if I was just doing the tech thing or actually making a living yet. Marissa, Brandon's fiancée, waved briefly. Not at me. Just vaguely in my direction. Someone handed her a glass of wine. She laughed, already talking to a city councilman. And Julia? She never once looked back. I sat there for another 20 minutes, then pulled out my phone. One message. One name. Execute. The reply came 5 seconds later. Understood. Then I put the phone away. And waited. I wasn't there for the vows. I was there for the shift. 10 years earlier, I stood at Julia's family's Thanksgiving table with a paper plate of dry turkey and forced smiles. Brandon had just gotten promoted at the family firm, and her father, Warren, was on his third scotch, listing his accomplishments like auction lots. When they got to me, there was a pause. "And what about Michael?" her aunt asked, feigning interest. "Still playing with that computer thing?" Everyone laughed. Julia squeezed my hand under the table. I was supposed to take it as affection, as solidarity. But her voice came first. "He's building something. It's just taking time." A room full of lawyers, hedge fund managers, and developers, and I was the one still taking time. Back then, large systems was just an idea, a prototype, and a few lines of code. I worked nights and weekends out of a shared apartment above a laundromat in Yonkers. Julia used to bring me takeout, sit on the floor with her legs tucked under her, and talk about the future. Back when it was us against the odds. But eventually, she stopped sitting on the floor and started sitting across the room, scrolling her phone. The first time I realized she'd turned was subtle. We were at a charity gala hosted by one of her mother's friends, a woman who ran some foundation with a forward name and a $3 million chandelier. Julia introduced me as Michael. "He's in tech." That was it. No details. No pride. That became the new default. Vague, clipped, dismissive. I understood what was happening. In their world, you either had prestige or you were a project. I had neither. But I also had no interest in performing. I built in silence. I took out no loans. No seed capital. I reinvested everything. Every cent that came in went back out to growth. I refused to take interviews. Kept my name off the filings. I was the ghost behind the curtain, the architect nobody noticed, and that's exactly how I wanted it. Meanwhile, Julia drifted further into her mother's orbit. Brunches. Designer fittings. Gala appearances. Once, I caught her rehearsing a laugh in the mirror. A laugh she used with her father's colleagues. Like a tool. I stopped trying to explain the back-end systems I was building or the regional integrations we were securing. She wasn't interested. All she wanted was for me to be present, which in her dictionary meant silent, smiling, and clean-shaven. One night, she sat across from me at dinner and said, "Brandon thinks you should try networking more. Maybe go to a few events. Dress better. Make connections." I nodded, didn't answer. That was the night I bought out the second logistics firm that fed into Firth Holdings' supply chain. They didn't even notice. I used a proxy firm, Reed Logistics. Harmless name. Mid-tier reputation. Nobody blinked. A month later, I acquired MHK Transit. Same method. Then third, Pendle Freight. By the time Larch owned 80% of Firth's Eastern distribution, their contracts had been renewed twice, under new names, higher rates. They still didn't look. Brandon had mentioned delays in a speech at a company party. "We've been hit by some hiccups in our supply line, but nothing we can't manage." He smiled, raised a glass. I watched the clip online. They didn't even know whose hand was around their throat. And Julia? She still thought I was dragging my feet. When we bought our townhouse in Hudson Heights, I paid cash. She asked if I got a bonus. "No," I said. A deal closed. She didn't ask which one. She didn't care. By then, she'd stopped sleeping in my bed 5 nights out of 7. Said I worked too late. Said I didn't engage. But she didn't know about the 2 a.m. calls with overseas clients, the price negotiations I held by myself because I couldn't afford a team yet. She didn't know I had already turned down 2 acquisition offers. She never asked. She thought power came with press releases, with smiling LinkedIn posts and charity board invites. She thought Brandon was winning because he shook hands and made toasts. She didn't realize I was buying out the foundation beneath their podium. She once joked, half drunk, "You know, sometimes I think I married the wrong brother." It was a careless line. She laughed after she said it. I didn't. The next morning, I put in the offer for the final acquisition, Glassport Transport, the last thread in the web that held up Firth Holdings' East Coast logistics. 6 months later, the web was mine. And the moment they put me at a plastic table next to a food truck generator at Brandon's wedding, they gave me the perfect excuse to burn it. They seated me beside the kitchen exit. Technically, it was called auxiliary patio seating, but even the waitstaff didn't bother hiding their pity. A few guests looked over, confused, assuming I was with the catering team or someone's assistant. I didn't correct them. I sat back, sipped my drink, and waited. In the distance, under cascading lights and floral arches, Brandon and Marissa posed for photographers like royalty. Julia clung to the front row like she belonged to it. Her laugh carried. She hadn't looked at me once since we arrived. The ceremony dragged through the usual rehearsed vows and champagne metaphors. Brandon called Marissa his anchor. Celeste's father called Brandon a promising extension of the Firth tradition. I watched all of it through the reflection of a silver tray being carried past me. When the applause erupted, I tapped one message on my phone. Now. Cyrus replied instantly. Confirmed. Pulling contract. He didn't need further instructions. We'd rehearsed this for months. The $42 million distribution deal between Firth Holdings and Eastern Regional Supply, the agreement keeping Brandon's division afloat, had just been terminated. The clause was clean. No loopholes. No room for negotiation. A simple clause buried in the renewal form about failure to recognize controlling interest within a 24-month span. They'd never bothered to read it. Brandon toasted the crowd. The guests cheered. Julia stood beside her mother, smiling like a news anchor. Everything felt choreographed, glossy, fake, but I wasn't there for the performance. Brandon walked past me on his way to the terrace bar. He glanced in my direction, didn't recognize the look in my eyes. Didn't even pause. Good. Let him think I was still the joke. That's what made this part work. Back inside, the music shifted to string quartet jazz. Guests started pairing off for the first round of dances. Julia danced with her father, then Brandon. She didn't even scan the room for me. That was her mistake. One of many. I stood, straightened my jacket, and stepped into the main ballroom. Nobody stopped me. Nobody noticed. I blended in just as they'd trained me to. The room shimmered with champagne-colored decor, custom candles with the couple's initials, and silent service waiters sweeping in like ghosts. I passed a mirror, my reflection still calm, centered, unbothered. I made my way to the main entrance, where a few Firth executives had gathered. They were checking their phones, scowling. One of them turned pale. Another muttered, "What the hell just happened to the supply line?" The news was spreading. An email had gone out from Eastern Regional Supply's legal department confirming immediate cessation of services. Warehouses frozen. Fleet access restricted. Internal communications flagged. And at the bottom of that message, all strategic decisions reviewed and approved by Large Systems. Large Systems, a name they'd heard in passing, never questioned. The quiet contractor. The harmless back-end vendor. Not worth a boardroom discussion. Until now. Julia spotted me from across the room. I saw the flicker of confusion. Then recognition. Then unease. She began moving toward me, weaving through a crowd of lawyers and influencers. I didn't wait. I approached Brandon first. He was in the middle of a toast with a group of real estate developers, laughing about expansion plans in New Jersey. I walked straight up to him and said, "Check your inbox." He blinked. "What?" "Check it," I repeated, tone flat. His phone was already buzzing. Dozens of notifications. The smile fell off his face. He opened one, scrolled, then froze. "What is this?" "Termination notice. Immediate. Eastern Regional Supply. Effective 15 minutes ago." "That's a mistake," he said. "We just renewed the—" "It's not a mistake," I said. "You didn't read the renewal. Section 4.3. Ownership clause." "I don't understand." "No," I said. "You never did." He looked at me like he was finally seeing something unfamiliar. Then came Julia's voice behind me. "Michael, what's going on?" I didn't turn around. "Ask your brother." Brandon was still staring at his phone. "Who the hell is Large Systems?" "I am," I said, facing both of them now. "I built it. Owned it. Structured every one of your critical vendors through holding companies you never even bothered to research." Silence spread like spilled wine. A few heads turned. A waiter stopped mid-pour. Julia's hand slowly rose to her mouth. "You're lying," Brandon said weakly. I took my phone out. Opened the ownership dashboard. Pressed display. The Large Systems parent account came up with my name. Full control. His face collapsed. Julia was pale. "Michael, why?" "Because," I said, "after 10 years of listening to your family laugh at me, seat me behind trash bins, and treat me like a placeholder, I wanted you to see what happens when the quiet one stops being polite." They stared. Mouths open. Minds scrambling. I walked past them and into the crowd. Whispers were already forming like cracks in plaster. The orchestra faltered. Photographers turned. In that moment, they weren't laughing anymore. And I didn't need to raise my voice. I didn't wait for the fallout to settle. I stood in the ballroom doorway, watching the ripples reach the corners of the event like shockwaves through water. There was no screaming. No scene. Just silence. Then a shift, subtle at first, but unmistakable. Phones came out. First a few. then more. Guests leaned toward their screens, brows furrowed. The clinks of champagne glasses faded. Someone whispered something sharp. Heads turned in waves. A woman near the back dropped her drink. The splash echoed louder than the quartet still playing. Then came the headline. Large Systems pulls $42 million supply contract. Firth Holdings in jeopardy. Brandon stood frozen, surrounded by a semicircle of executives who looked like they'd just realized the ground wasn't solid. His father, Warren, appeared from somewhere near the cigar patio, his face already flushed, not from drink, but from realization. He scanned the room like a general trying to locate a sniper. Julia found me again near the edge of the bar. She wasn't smiling anymore. "What did you do?" she asked, voice low, almost steady. "I answered a question," I said. "The one none of you ever asked." "I don't understand." "No," I replied. "You chose not to." She stepped closer. "You're humiliating us." I gave a half smile. "I'm revealing you." People weren't laughing anymore. They were watching. And that was the point. Her father reached us seconds later, his voice low but strained. "We need to talk." Privately. I sipped my drink. "We're already doing that." "This is your fault," he hissed, stepping closer. "You've destroyed Brandon's future. My family's reputation." "No," I said. "Brandon destroyed that the moment he stopped reading his own contracts. You destroyed it when you laughed at someone who didn't need your last name." Warren stared like he was seeing me for the first time, not Julia's quiet, passive husband, but something else. Something that didn't blink when challenged. He opened his mouth, but I cut him off. "Don't threaten me. You're standing in a room funded by a company that now depends on mine to survive. Choose your words carefully." He stepped back. Not much, but enough. And then he left, retreating without another word. Julia still hadn't moved. Her shoulders were tight, arms crossed, like she was trying to hold the frame of her life in place through sheer posture. "You could have warned me," she said, voice smaller. "I did," I said. "Every time I came home late. Every time you called my work, that computer thing. Every time you asked me to dress nicer so your family wouldn't ask questions." Tears welled in her eyes, but didn't fall. She blinked rapidly, as if trying to find a reset button. "I protected you," she said quietly. "You dressed me up and seated me next to the help. That's not protection. That's projection." People were watching now, not overtly, but subtly. A few lingered nearby. A man in a tux raised his phone like he was adjusting something, but I knew it was recording. Julia finally seemed to notice the stares. "Can we just go somewhere else to talk?" "I'm done talking," I said. "This is your scene, Julia. Smile for the photographers." Her jaw tightened. "Then, you planned all this?" "Yes. All these months, you just sat there and built," I said. "While you entertained." The ballroom had changed. Energy drained out of it like someone pulled a cork. Guest whispered. A bridesmaid ducked into the restroom, clearly crying. Celeste's father was on the phone in the hallway, face beet red, pacing like the floor was collapsing beneath him. It was. Large Systems had been the quiet foundation of 3 of Firth's primary vendor lines. I'd waited until the contracts were synchronized, auto-renewed, deeply integrated. One button canceled all 3. Each vendor had clauses allowing immediate withdrawal in case of ownership breach. Brandon signed them himself. Julia followed me as I walked through the garden entrance. The air outside was cooler, darker. String lights flickered above hedges. "I don't get it," she said again. "Why now? Why like this?" I turned to her, finally, fully. "Because I got tired of being erased in the room I paid to build." She looked away. In the distance, I heard a murmur rise inside the ballroom. More notifications. More headlines. My name was trending now. Someone would piece together the holding companies by morning. The story would be public by Monday. But this moment, was mine. "I stood next to you for years," I said, calm. "And you stood next to them while they laughed. I didn't mean to. You didn't stop it." She had no answer. The photographers were now drifting toward the garden, sensing something real was happening, something unscripted. I turned away before they got close. "You're burning everything down," she said behind me. "No," I said without turning back. "I'm walking out while it burns." And I left her there, in the garden of her brother's wedding, with her makeup perfect, her mask slipping, and her world finally cracking where I'd already repaired mine. I didn't return to our hotel that night. I stayed in a business suite 2 blocks away, one I'd reserved under another name, months ago, just in case. The garden outside the wedding was probably still full of whispers, faces pretending not to look shocked while their fingers refreshed news alerts. I watched it all unfold from a distance. Firth Holdings press office issued a statement before midnight, calling the contract termination unexpected and under review. But they knew better. They were spiraling. Their vendors were too entangled, their dependencies too fragile. I'd mapped it all for months. By dawn, their stock had fallen 7%. By noon, another 3.2%. Investors called. Board members demanded answers. Contracts got reviewed and re-reviewed. And still, my name wasn't in the paperwork, not officially. Not yet. Let them panic in the dark. I had no interest in stepping into the spotlight. My silence was the statement. Julia called 3 times that weekend. I didn't answer. On the 4th try, she left a message. Michael, I just want to talk. Please. I didn't know, okay? I didn't know any of this. I just want to understand. Understand what? That the man she dismissed as decent but small had built the floor she danced on? That while she was trying to impress her brothers-in-laws, I was designing the fuse. I didn't delete the message. I didn't return it either. Monday came fast. News outlets had picked up the story. Shadow Tech owner wrecks $42 million deal. Billion-dollar move erupts at Firth wedding. The photos weren't flattering. Blurry shots of me walking through the estate, hands in pockets, face calm, surrounded by chaos. One article called me the quiet architect. Another said I'd pulled a strategic execution worthy of Sun Tzu. I didn't care for the headlines. I cared about the silence from the Firths. They didn't respond publicly. Of course they didn't. Admitting they'd been outmaneuvered by their own in-law wasn't something their PR firm had a playbook for. Julia showed up on Tuesday. She was standing outside my office building when I arrived. No makeup, plain coat, neutral expression. She didn't wave. She just waited. I walked past her. She followed. You're just going to ignore me? She asked once we were inside the elevator. I am, I said. The doors closed. She stayed quiet for a while. I could feel her eyes on me, searching, pleading. But I gave her nothing. Inside my office, I didn't offer her a seat. She stood. You didn't have to do it that way, she said finally. You didn't have to embarrass us. You're still using the word us, like we're on the same team, I replied. She shifted. I didn't know what you were building. No, I said. You never asked. I stood beside you. You stood beside me when it was convenient. When you needed a prop. When you wanted to show your friends you married a man with potential. That's not fair. It's precise. She went quiet. The only sound was the ticking of my office clock. I wasn't trying to hurt you, she said softly. You didn't need to. You just watch while they did. Her eyes flicked toward the desk, the awards, the framed blueprints of systems she'd never cared to ask about. A nameplate she hadn't seen before. Michael R. LANGSTON, founder. You're not the same man I married, she said finally. No, I agreed. That man thought being kind would be enough. What happens now? You go back to your world, I said. What's left of it? And you? She asked. I looked her in the eye. I keep building. She hesitated. We could talk. Try again. I mean, everything's changed now. I've already filed, I said. Her breath caught. What? Separation. You'll get the paperwork this week. She took a step back. Michael, wait. I gave you years, Julia, I said, voice low. Years to ask. Years to see me. You didn't. You only saw what you wanted, someone easy to ignore. I didn't mean to ignore you. But you did. The elevator dinged in the hall. I turned toward the window, watching traffic slide by below. She stayed a moment longer. Then I heard her footsteps retreat. She never said goodbye, and I never looked back. 3 weeks passed. The story didn't die. It mutated. Articles came and went, but the consequences remained. Firth Holdings kept hemorrhaging value. Vendors left. Contracts broke. Their quarterly report was a disaster. They issued a public statement calling it market volatility. Behind the scenes, they were scrambling. That's when James Firth showed up, Julia's father. He didn't call. He didn't email. He walked into the lobby of my downtown office with an expression I'd never seen on his face before, uncertainty. The receptionist recognized him. Everyone did. But she followed protocol and asked him to wait. I let him sit there 20 minutes before I called him in. When he entered my office, I didn't stand. I didn't offer coffee. I didn't smile. He took the seat across from me like it was made of thorns. Michael, he began, voice lower than usual, I'd like to speak to you candidly. I nodded once. We've made mistakes. I've made mistakes. Judged too quickly, dismissed too easily. You dismissed me while I was building your foundation, I said plainly. He flinched. Yes. And now, unfortunately, that's come back to bite us. The fallout from the large system's termination, it's worse than we projected. I let the silence stretch. He cleared his throat. We're restructuring. We've brought in outside consultants. But it's not enough. My board believes that a bridge partnership with Larch would help stabilize things. I raised an eyebrow. You want me to re-establish the contract? I want to repair the damage. No, I said. You want me to rescue you? He didn't respond. You ignored me for a decade, James. Laughed behind my back. Sat me next to the coat rack at Thanksgiving dinners. He had the decency to look down. And now, I continued, you're here because the man you ignored is the only one left holding a life raft. I came because I respect you, he said quietly. No, I corrected. You came because you fear what happens if I say no. He didn't argue. I opened a drawer and placed a thin folder on the table. Inside is an option, I said. Not charity. A restructuring package, partial reintegration, 3 conditional vendor lines, and access to a scaled-back version of Larch's logistics interface. He reached for it, cautiously. Read it carefully, I added. There are clauses your team won't like. But they'll survive them. Better than bankruptcy. His jaw flexed. I appreciate this, he said after a pause. Sincerely. I don't need appreciation, I said. I need follow-through. He nodded once, then stood. I assume Julia told you I tried to talk her out of the divorce. She didn't, I said. And it doesn't matter. He studied me. She was raised to chase appearances. So was I replied. The difference is I grew out of it. He left without shaking my hand. Later that day, my assistant brought me a small envelope. No return address. Inside was a handwritten card. The writing was Julia's. Some things, it read, aren't meant to survive success. I understand now. There was no apology. Just implication. Just emptiness. I folded the card and filed it away in the bottom drawer, where reminders belong. The next week, Larch Systems officially acquired 12% of Firth Holdings through a silent intermediary. Not enough for control, just enough to be heard at the table. Brandon wasn't at the next board meeting. Rumor was he'd been asked to step away pending internal audit. No statement. No denial. Julia didn't show either. But I heard through someone she'd moved into a condo near the lake, smaller than the family home, humbler than the life she once presented. She'd gone off social media. No selfies. No brunch shots. Just gone. And me? I was still building. Quietly. Precisely. Strategically. I didn't need cameras. I didn't need credit. I had leverage. And leverage doesn't need to shout. It was the Firth Foundation's annual gala, a black tie event held at the Wyndham Conservatory, a place so polished it could reflect your sins if you stood still long enough. I wasn't on the official guest list, but I was the head of the new primary sponsor. No one stopped me at the door. The foyer was flooded with chandeliers and donors in tailored arrogance. Cameras flashed and practiced rhythm. The Firth name was everywhere, engraved on plaques, stitched into napkins, projected behind the stage. But the money behind the night? That wasn't theirs anymore. My name wasn't on the wall, but it was on every check that kept this event alive. Julia was there. She wore emerald, classic, calculated. Her hair was pinned in that way she'd always favored for cameras. She didn't see me at first. She was mid-conversation, smiling that curated smile of hers. Then someone whispered in her ear. Her face froze. She turned. We locked eyes across the ballroom. She blinked, once. Then her father appeared, James Firth, still trying to walk like a man in charge. He was flanked by 2 board members. One of them noticed me and stopped mid-sentence. The dominoes were falling already. The MC, a local news anchor with a plastic grin, tapped the microphone. We'd like to take a moment to thank this year's premier sponsor, a new partner to the Firth Foundation, whose generous investment ensured this evening could happen. A murmur swept the room. James shifted. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Michael LANGSTON. I didn't walk fast. I didn't smile. I didn't wave. Just took the stage in a gray suit, crisp, quiet, deliberate. I looked over the crowd, the very people who once looked past me. The ones who asked Julia if I was still working with computers. The ones who laughed behind glasses of imported wine while I sat quietly beside the gift table. Now every eye was locked on me. I won't take much of your time, I said. I'm not here for applause. I paused. I'm here to correct the record. Silence. No clinking of glasses. No whispers. Years ago, I stood at a Firth dinner table and was asked what I did. I said I was building. They laughed, called me hopeful, delusional, told me dreams don't pay dividends. A few people shifted uncomfortably. Well, they were half right. Dreams don't pay dividends. Execution does. I turned to the side of the stage, nodded. A screen lowered. It lit up with a single slide. The current investor structure of the Firth Foundation, post-sponsorship. Large systems. 5 shell core. One name behind them all. Mine. Gasps, then silence again. I didn't look at Julia. I didn't need to. They thought I was building apps. I was building leverage. Quietly, without needing to wear it. I stepped off the stage without another word. No bow. No flourish. Just the truth, hung in the air like smoke. James tried to intercept me near the stairs. You blindsided us again. No, I said. You just never learned to look up. You think this makes you noble? No. But it makes me visible. Julia approached behind him. Michael. I cut her off with a glance. I'm not here to argue, I said. I'm not here to reconcile. I'm here to close the scene. She tried to speak again. I raised a hand. Don't. Not tonight. Not ever. The donors, the guests, even the waitstaff, they were all watching now. The woman who once told me to smile for the photographers was now frozen under their flash. I walked out through the marble lobby as another announcement echoed behind me. I didn't catch it. Didn't care. Outside, the wind was cool. Quiet. The driver opened the car door. Back to the office, sir? No, I said. Somewhere else. Somewhere quieter. As we pulled away, I glanced back once. Through the glass, I saw her, Julia, still standing by the staircase, a statue chipped by something far sharper than words. That was the final cut. No more explanations. No more noise. The mask had fallen. No more cameras needed.